Well, hey, good to see you guys. Well, I can't see you. You can see me, but I wish I could see you. I'm at home, uh, trying to do the kind of shelter at home thing a little bit more. I tend to get out maybe more than I should, and I think that was a little concerning to my family. And so I'm trying to stay sheltered a little bit more, but I hate this. I hate just not being around people, feeling disconnected. So but it's good to be with you. And I thought maybe I'd just touch base today. I don't know if we'll make this a pattern, touch base on Tuesday. Maybe we'll touch base on Thursday, and we'll touch base on Sunday. Maybe that'll be our pattern. I don't know. But I wanted to touch base with you today. Uh, the reality of this situation, I want to make sure that we stay in touch with both sides of it. And what I mean by that is on one side, there is a reality out there of this epidemic, this pandemic, whatever you want to call it. It is for real. Now, how expansive it'll get still is a prediction, so I don't know for sure. But it clearly is happening. It's happened in our own church family. But Gina, just so you know, there's positive steps. She seems to be responding and getting better. There's some key things going to happen today. Try to see if they can take her off the ventilator at least for a while and see if that she can stand that. So there's really good news on that level. Tough news, her family, who has been Manoj and the boy, the two girls and their son, and Gina's brother have been in quarantine, and her brother needs to get tested today. He seems to have started maybe being symptomatic, and so we need to continue to pray for them. I also want to make sure that we focus on the other side of the same coin. They're not mutually exclusive. The other side of that coin is the fact that God is still there. God is still real. God is still at work. God is still doing His thing. He is still faithful. He is merciful. He is compassionate. He is holy. He's everything about that. And so I never want us to forget that the two sides of this reality, both of them are just as real, okay? So I know many of you, you're out there getting a lot of information, sometimes maybe too much information. So I do have two thoughts for you. The first one is this. I would really suggest that you find one or two really good sources for news, for information. Some of you that I've talked to are becoming almost obsessed with reading dozens and dozens of reports. And I would just suggest that might add to your anxiety because it can be overwhelming. It can be a little crazy. So I would encourage you, though, stay in touch with truth. Stay in touch with reality. But don't overwhelm yourself with all that information that just eventually drives you up a wall and can unnecessarily create anxiety in your heart. So that'd be my thought. But the other side of that is I would encourage you to stay in touch with the other side of that reality. I'd encourage you to carve out time every day to have some quiet time, some solitude, some quiet time with the Lord. And I'd encourage you to kind of use that to depressurize, kind of deflate all the crazy, all the intensity that each one of us are going through. And spend a little bit of quiet time with the Lord in His Word, and let it just be quiet. The world will still be there when you get done. If you just take 5, maybe 15 minutes, maybe more, maybe a half hour, just to let it be quiet for a moment. And sometimes that can be hard because your heart's kind of racing, your mind is racing. But spend some time in His Word. Let it begin to focus not only on the situation that we find ourselves in, but the one who controls the situation, the one who is over the whole world, and the one who is reliable and trustworthy, and that you can be with Him, at least just quietly for a few minutes. So I'd encourage you to do that. We also, when this whole pandemic kind of began to feel more pressure, or at least kind of coming out, maybe 2 weeks ago, a little less maybe. If we were on a scale from maybe over here on the very far being, hey, this is a hoax. There's no truth to this. It's a joke. Don't freak out. There's nothing to it. And then way over here, maybe this would be, hey, this is the end of the world. We need to all lose our minds. So I probably found myself not quite in the middle, but maybe a little bit leaning to this side where I was like, hey, this is an issue, but let's not make too much of it. Not sure how much precaution we need to take. I was kind of right over here. But then I spent some time with people I trust, people that know the medicine of this, know the issues. And as we talked, I kind of went from being right over here to kind of being right over here. Not extreme, but I spent some time with a couple of doctors in our church, and they knew the numbers. They understood the medical part a little bit better, clearly, than I did. And what they talked about moved me kind of over here to say, you know what, we need to take this more seriously. I need to take it more seriously. And I need to understand this side of it. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Dr. Joe Moore. For many of you, you know him at our church. He is a doctor. He practices in Bolivar 2 weeks out of the month. And so sometimes we don't see him as regularly as we would like to. But he and his wife, Marty, who is also a doctor, we sat down together and they kind of explained some things that really helped me. And so I asked Joe if he'd put together a video explaining the medical side of this, the reality of it, from someone I trust. Because sometimes when I watch things on TV, I don't know if it's tainted. I don't know if they have an agenda. Not really sure. But I know Joe and I know Marty and I trust them explicitly. So I asked him if he'd put together an explanation that might help each one of us to understand this and help me understand why staying at home more often than I was is really a good idea. So today we have my son and Diane and myself all working from home. The only quiet place I could find was here in the unfinished basement, so forgive me for the not so attractive background. But this is where I thought I could cut a video, because we're all trying to cooperate and be respectful, not only for our own good, but for the good of everybody around us, that we would stay put and respect that distance. So it's hard work for me. I don't like it, but I think I need to do it more out of love for the people around me. So let me introduce Joe, and why don't you take it from here, Joe, and give us some understanding from a medical perspective.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Moore. I'm an interventional cardiologist and member of Quest. Kevin has asked me to make a short video to talk about the coronavirus. As many of you know, the new coronavirus, or novel coronavirus, was first detected in China in perhaps late December or early January, and has spread like wildfire around the world. This is a new virus to us as humans, therefore we don't have any immunity to it. It is a virus that tends to be very aggressive in the way it spreads. It tends to cause a significant illness in a small portion of patients, and is taxing the medical system here and abroad. Most people who pick up coronavirus, this COVID-19 infection, will have a relatively mild or moderate disease or illness. It'll feel like a cold or a severe cold with fever and chills and a runny nose and all the things that entails. In probably 80 to 85% of patients, as far as we know, the illness remains mild and people recover without any trouble. In about 15 or 20% of patients, however, the illness can become quite severe, and in a small proportion, the illness can be fatal. And what's so dramatic about this is the estimated fatality risk if you develop the disease is probably 10 to 50 times what it is for a normal seasonal flu. It's estimated that the case mortality risk right now is around 3 to 5%. We probably won't know until everything is all said and done. The reason that we're trying to, quote, flatten the curve, end quote, is to delay a huge spike of infections that will overwhelm the medical system. You've already seen that in Italy and now in Spain, and we're trying our best to prevent that from happening here. The resources we have available for seriously ill patients are limited. The government is responding by getting private corporations to manufacture more ventilators and masks and gloves and gowns and all those sorts of things. But for right now, everything is pretty limited. So the best thing we can do as a nation is to try and limit the spread of the disease as best we can. The best way to know how to do that is to have some basic information about how this virus is transmitted and what happens when you get it. This is an airborne virus. It's spread by droplets. So when you cough or sneeze, the little droplets get on your hand, they get on your desk in front of you or the chair, and as you touch something with your hand that has the virus particles on it, it gets transmitted to that object. And sometimes these virus particles on certain types of materials, such as hard plastics, can last for days. And then another person comes along, they touch that object, they then touch their face, and you've transmitted the disease. Now, there is some data that also says that the infection can be spread by aerosols. That means when you sneeze, the particles don't fall to the ground or the surrounding surfaces, they remain in the air, and they can remain in the air for a couple hours, apparently. The best way that we can prevent that spread is taking steps to prevent spreading the particles. The best thing to do is to know that it spreads from person to person, to cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze. If you feel like you're sick, you can wear a mask, and that will protect others around you from coughing out particles and infecting them. We should all be washing our hands multiple times a day. If you touch anything that you think might be infected, or something that other people use, like a door handle or an elevator knob or anything like that, you want to wash your hands, and particularly avoid touching your face. And that means touching your eyes, nose, or mouth. The technique for washing your hands is nice warm soap and water, and wash your hands for about 20 to 30 seconds, including your fingers, your thumbs, and underneath your fingernails, all the way up to your wrist, basically. And then turn off the faucet with a paper towel. Don't touch the faucet that you just turned on with dirty hands. The other thing that you can do is use that paper towel to open doorknobs. If you have hand sanitizer, when you touch a doorknob, sanitize your hands. Just to be very meticulous about making sure your hands are clean as best as possible. The other thing you can do is avoid close contact with people, and that's what this social distancing is all about. That means keeping people at 2 arms length, so your fingertips could touch if you were close enough. That way you're less likely to transmit the virus from person to person directly. The other thing is that if you are sick, if you feel ill, certainly you need to keep yourself away from other people so that you don't contaminate them, infect them. You don't want to contaminate the rooms that they're in, contaminate the surfaces that they're touching. You should be isolated into one room in your house and only one person go in and help you and things like that. And we'll talk about that more later. But the idea is to prevent you, if you're sick, from spreading the disease. If you are working and you're sick, stay home. That's why work has been closed. That's why schools have been closed. That's why transportation has been curtailed. That's why we are being encouraged to shelter in place, if you will. It's not quite a quarantine, but it's close enough. If you feel that you have been contaminated or infected, you want to clean and disinfect all the surfaces that you might have touched, particularly around your home. You want to try and have an area of the home that you can decontaminate yourself if you think you've been contaminated. So such as out in the garage, have some hand sanitizer in the garage, sanitize before you ever touch the doorknob to go in. Take your shoes off. Some people are changing clothes to a different set of clothes, putting the dirty clothes in a bag or a basket and then washing them frequently. The whole idea is to not bring the virus into your house if you can help it. If you are sick enough that you feel like you need medical attention, the first thing you do is you call your doctor and tell them what's going on. And the signs of being ill are having a cough, sore throat, a fever, a temperature of 100.5 or higher, or if you feel like you're short of breath. Those are the instances where you want to call your physician and talk it over. Now, if you feel like you're sick enough that you really can't breathe, you're really having a lot of trouble, you'd want to call 911 and make sure that you inform the operator on 911 that you think you might have an infection, that you describe your symptoms to them so that they can be prepared when they come to evaluate you. What you don't want to do is, if you feel a little bit of a cold or muscle aches or just a little bit ill, you don't want to be running to the hospital, because the hospitals are already overwhelmed and they're going to get worse. And you'll end up sitting at the hospital for hours and potentially being infected while you're there. A lot of hospitals are setting up tents outside to screen people before they allow them in the building, and that you're going to see more and more of. But the whole idea is to just not spread the disease around if at all possible. Certainly, if you're ill enough that you think you need medical attention, you need to seek that medical attention sooner rather than later, and pray to God that it won't get worse. One thing I would like to finish up with today is we can take assurance that we're not alone in this. We're all in this together as brothers and sisters in Christ, as citizens of the United States and of the world. The virus doesn't care what color you are, what sex you are, or what nationality or political persuasion you are. It doesn't care. And the thing to take assurance is that God is in control. He asks us to trust Him throughout Scripture, and we need to rest in that promise. As Jesus said in Matthew 6, verse 34, "Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is the day's own trouble." So rest assured in that. Know that God is there. He knows what we're going through. He's seen it all. And God bless you, and hopefully give you an update soon.